now, I don't wanna feel it. Wish I knew how I could forget for a while. You look like a face under the ocean, and I just might keep on swimming for miles. It's like nothing ever changed. But I know we ain't the same. I wonder what you're thinking. I wonder if you're with somebody new. I wonder how you're doing. It's a feeling that I can't get used to. I'm outside looking for a reason. Under blue skies, my head's stuck in the clouds. I wanna know if you still feel it. I wanna know if I'm just another face in the crowd. It's like nothing ever changed. But I know we ain't the same. I wonder what you're thinking. I wonder if you're with somebody new. I wonder how you're doing. It's a feeling that I can't get used to. And I've been singing, trying to get my head on straight. And I wonder what you're doing. It's a feeling that I can't get used to. I wonder what you're thinking. I wonder if you're with somebody new. I wonder how you're doing. It's a feeling that I can't get used to. And I've been singing, trying to get my head on straight. And I wonder what you're doing. It's a feeling that I can't get used to.
This does not even deserve a captain's log introduction, because this is dead serious.
Calling all stations. Clear the air lanes. Clear all air lanes for the big broadcast.
Hello from across the pond. This is the King of England, Nigel Farage. Well, nearly.
Bruh.
And you're listening to The Josiah Show. Man, I just can't get enough.
Yo, don't touch that freaking dial, because you are now tuned in to The Josiah Show.
Oh my God!
With goofs, spoofs,
These are all great qualities I look for in a minion.
and I like to think all the minions have all these qualities to various degrees.
Yeah, but some are just a little bit more pronounced.
And of course, the occasional gaff.
Oh,
Excuse me, Ricky.
Ricky, I did see what you were doing.
Oh, that's not good.
It felt good, didn't it?
Whoa, okay,
Oh.
that's just weird.
Bruh.
It's all right here on 95.1 KUGR. And now, here he is, your host, Josiah Pike. Hey.
Ooh, wow.
How you doing, guys? You're listening to the Josiah Show. Welcome back once again.
Josiah Show.
It's a beautiful day over here in Pullman. It's very sunny today. It's nice. We got the genius Jack Kircher back again on the show.
Childhood inventor.
Yeah, childhood inventor, boy genius, and IMDb certified actor.
I was a boy genius, but I'm not a genius anymore.
Yeah,
I went down.
I don't know what happened to you.
Yeah.
You used to invent things, man.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Well, Mikey is on the way. He'll be here soon. He's gonna be a little late today. And then Josh, unfortunately, he got deported, so he's not coming back.
Yeah.
But that's okay. You know, we can have fun without him. But
yeah,
anyway,
Mikey he's getting out of the mines today. He's super excited. He might be a little dirty when he gets here.
yeah, he yearned for the mines for so long, and he finally got them. So
Yep.
I'm happy for him. But yeah, we'll be here soon, and we got actually like a I don't mean to brag, but we got like a fantastic show today. You know, I'm not even, and that's completely objective. I would say that if I was hosting the show or not. But yeah, it's a great show today.
Thank you to our studio audience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the band, the Josiah Pike band, once
Yep,
again. I really
they're in
appreciate
here.
them. Yeah,
They're in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not paying them anything, so they don't talk during the show, but
Yeah.
they're always listening.
They're pretty shy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, much like me and everyone else on this show usually.
Yeah.
But anyway, we do got a great show. We're gonna finish the Chris Chan presentation today. That's gonna be. I'm really excited for this. You know, we got to part 1 last time, and you know it was a great segment. And today we're gonna do part 2, and then we're gonna talk about. There was this thing. Charlie Kirk came to campus today, which you probably saw. We're gonna talk about that. That was a pretty. It was pretty weird. And then there was this one really annoying guy. And we're gonna talk who came and asked him a stupid question. We're
named Doug.
Yeah, this guy named Doug. No relation to the Doug we know, but we're going to talk about that when we get to it. But that's all coming up. That might be all, to be honest, because those are both pretty long segments. But we have a conspiracy game ready as well in case we have time. So,
Yep.
yeah. So anyway, we'll be getting. We're not going to waste a lot of time. We'll get to the Chris Chan presentation in just a minute. But before we do, I did want to say, yeah, we're not because usually we like talk about random stuff for the first 20 minutes or
we got
whatever.
a whole itinerary.
And before we do, I did want to say officially, Jack has gone. He's Bart again.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
Bart Simpson now.
Yeah, he's back to Bart. Do the eat my shorts again.
Short hair, no facial hair.
Yep.
I can't do Bart. I'm not good at Bart.
You're not okay. You don't have to. Yeah. But yeah,
I'm shy, just like our band.
Yeah, I know. It really shows sometimes.
Shorts.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it sounded just like him.
No way.
Round of applause for Bart.
All right, stop.
Okay, yeah, they're done. But that did sound just like him. You know. Well, good for you for holding up to your end of the bargain. You know, for losing the game. And the really sad thing is if me and Mikey lose, hypothetically, if we do the conspiracy game today, and me and Mikey lose, the last show will be your show.
It'll be the Jack show.
And I'm still gonna stand. I'll still allow that to happen. You know, I mean, although realistically, as I say, if that happens, the ending of the show we're still gonna do like. I have to, still say goodbye permanently and all that. That sounds really bad, like I'm dying or something.
Yeah,
but
you're gonna be crying your eyes out.
yeah, I'm going to cry. Unironically,
Yeah.
it's going to be very. I'm not actually going to cry. I don't think.
Well, let me say, I did have to do the Bart thing, but it's mainly because my girl's parents are coming to town. I want to look clean.
Oh yeah, they said if you have a beard, then
Yeah.
you're going in the.
Yeah, I want to look like Bart Simpson for that.
Why are they coming to town? Is it like her birthday or something?
No, I'm just coming to town.
Okay, yeah. My parents don't. I think they only come to town, like to pick me up from here sometimes. So
My parents never come to town.
yeah, I'm not saying that as like an insult to them, but yeah, they don't usually come just because they feel like it. So that's fine, whatever. But anyway, moving on though. Well, I guess I just wanted to acknowledge Jack did uphold his end of the bargain, so he is Bart now.
Yeah.
Now that you can see it, because if you were here, it totally changes the entire dynamic of the show. But yeah, I hope you enjoy just knowing that this man is now Bart Simpson.
I'm no longer the straight man.
Yeah, now he's the bad boy daredevil who you can't wear a T-shirt of him or else it'll get banned. So.
Oh, I should have skated in today.
Well, do you skate at all?
No,
No, you don't.
but that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, no, it would be. Hold on, the headphone cords are kind of tangled up. Let me just fix that.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. My hand got uncomfortably close to your balls when I had to do that, but
Okay.
whatever. All right, anyway, though, let's just get right to it. I guess enough preamble. Let's get right to the Chris Chan presentation, the highlight of the show recently. I'm really excited to get to part 2, which has part 1, if I had to be honest, is probably objectively funnier, the stuff in it. But part 2, and we're starting with it, has my favorite Chris Chan sagas of all time. So, or my number 1 favorite saga of all time. So
Really?
I can't spend a lot of time recapping, and obviously it's. I would recommend going back and listening to part 1 after, or if you want and you don't know, just skip this episode and listen to part 1, and then listen to part 2 when you feel like it.
Yeah,
Because
you're gonna be lost.
yeah, there's no way I can explain all this stuff. But basically, the easiest way to put it is, for those who don't know, Chris Chan is a internet lolcow who gets made fun of a lot. He's the creator of the Sonichu comics, which is a combination of Sonic and Pikachu.
Lol cow.
Yeah, lolcow, one of the best words in the English language.
You should explain. That's not a very well known word.
Well, it's someone who you milk the lols right out of because they're so funny and easy to make fun of, I guess. So that's the point. Is he's a guy on the internet who gets made fun of a lot and gets trolled a lot by people. Sometimes he looks at the trolls. Well, that might be a troll, but continue. But he doesn't know at the time yet that if they are or not. But yeah, he is a famous guy on the internet, and he creates the Sonichu comic, which is probably his most famous piece of art, I guess you want to call it that. And yeah, so we are about at 2009, late 2009 at this point. So to recap, so Chris Chan recently has just been in a feud with Liquid Chris, who was a guy basically impersonating him. And the sad thing is he was way better than Chris in basically every way at Chris's own game. So that's the real tragedy of Liquid Chris. But now that saga just ended, and now Chris has to move on with his life. And we get into what, in my opinion, was probably the funniest saga in Chris Chan history. And if you, again, feel free to interject or ask any questions or whatever, because that's what makes it funny.
I was disappointed. Know anything about it.
It seems like you didn't understand the Liquid thing when I was done explaining it. So I guess I'm gonna have to re-explain tomorrow or something.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so we move on to the Asperchu saga. So in late 2009, there was a Sonichu parody comic called Asperchu, which was written by this guy Alec Benson Leary. So Asperchu follows the adventures of the titular electric Asper's hedgehog and his friends Max and Jiven, who go on adventures and all that. So obviously Asperchu was a parody of Chris and Sonichu, since Asperchu was basically Sonichu, except for he was fat and wore glasses and had a goatee, which Chris did at one point. And he was on his own love quest, and he had a red and blue striped shirt, much like Chris's most famous outfit.
Mm.
So anyway, the series was a huge critical hit, with readers loving its deep characters, its story, and its beautiful artwork. Or at least better than Sonichu artwork. So anyway, the series, it lasted, I think, about 10 issues, skipping forward a little bit into 2011, before Alec just kind of lost interest, I guess. And the funny thing is, Alec made 10 issues of Asperchu in the amount of time it took Chris to make 5 of Sonichu. Because that dude was fast, he could do this stuff fast. So anyway, Chris found Asperchu in January of 2010, and obviously he wasn't a fan. And he particularly hated the high levels of gore, swearing, and, as he put it, blocky, low-resolution art. Which, of course, none of that stuff really mattered. I mean, the art would matter if it was actually bad, but Chris is no one to talk, so who cares what the art looked like.
Mm.
And anyway, so Alec and Chris started this relationship over the phone, where they began to try to settle the beef a bit. So Alec tried to kind of reason with Chris to improve his efforts with his comic and all that, but Chris mostly just demanded Alec do things like tell all the Sonichu fans who left him for Asperchu to come back, and then either write out or change the names of all the parodies of his characters that were in Asperchu.
Wow. Even though Sonichu is a parody.
Yeah, he still told him to do that, which he wouldn't. Chris at one point tried to make a claim, okay, I could sue you, but I'm trying to settle this reasonably, which obviously didn't work. So Alec also tried to get Chris to make an apology video to him after all the death threats and stuff he made against him, because he went that far. And Chris did make a lot of apology videos, but none were satisfactory to Alec for various reasons.
Mm.
One of them he was just reading off a script clearly, and one of them he spent half of it attacking an associate of Alec who we're going to get to. So. And when I say, I'll just clarify, when I say this is my favorite saga, I mean more so all the stuff that was happening in late 2009, early 2010 that was associated with Asperchu. I mean, despite the fact that Asperchu was actually, a good comic, and there was a lot of funny stuff that happened around this time. So anyway, and continuing onward, so this is a time where the Wikipedia had a lot of problems, where the Wikipedia was Chris's personal website where he posted, it was his version of a wiki about himself.
Mm.
And he posted a lot of...
biography.
Yeah, it's also where he posted the Sonichu comics, and where he would answer mailbags from the fans, as he called them, which were, the fans just asking questions.
Hmm.
So anyway, at that point, the new strategy of buying ad space on the Wikipedia and putting ads there for things you would hate, like LGBT rights and Asperger's awareness. Because part of the thing with Asperger is Chris hates Asperger's in general, because he thinks people with Asperger's are higher functioning than people with autism, but they're stealing the limelight from people with autism. He legit thinks that. So he, of course, had a big problem with this. So Mao Ling, who was the Asperpedia's webmaster, also began advertising Asperchu on the Wikipedia, and he was pretty upset about that. So at first he tried to delete the ads or replace them with ads he downloaded off the internet, but that's illegal. So that's illegal. So he didn't end up doing it, and the ads stayed up. So some of the ads, I'll say them because they're pretty funny, and Jack can see them. One is, it says, Peter Griffin and Seth MacFarlane support gay rights. Shouldn't you? Because, Chris is a big fan of Family Guy.
It's a picture of Peter Griffin.
Yeah. It says, don't be naive. Click here to get the facts. Which I didn't say, but naive is Chris's least favorite word, he said, because he thinks it questions one's intelligence. Which isn't even really what it means, but anyway. And then there's one that says, my gay autistic son won $10 million. Could yours? So
Who's that? Who is that?
I don't know. It's just some kid they found on the internet. But anyway, so on top of that, there was some other problems Chris was having. So he now faced a lawsuit for copyright infringement. So to go back in time a little bit, in 2008, this guy, Evan Christopher George, who was like the first troll to actually directly contact Chris, sent him a fan character of Sonichu called Seaman Chew, which, by the way, it's not pronounced. It's not said like that, seminal fluids, but apparently it's like based off an anime or something. I'm not really familiar with it, but yeah, it doesn't mean semen, but it's pronounced Seaman Chew. Although
Like Simon.
Yeah, Chris pronounced it as Simon Chew, but the correct pronunciation was Seaman Chew. And he had drills for hands and a cape was his characteristics. So Chris decided not to use this character, but he decided to basically just rip it off eventually and create a ground-type rose chew, as he called it, named Simonla, who was basically the same exact thing, except she was a girl, and she had a shell instead of a cape and infrared eyes instead of goggles. So Evan discovered Simonla and told Chris to take her out because he didn't give her permission to rip off Seaman Chew like that. And Chris initially just tried to ignore Evan, but Evan eventually decided to start threatening he was going to sue Chris if he didn't do it.
Okay.
So anyway, moving on with that, he received nothing but lies and refusals from Chris. And it got to the point where he said Seaman Chew was never an inspiration for Simonla, despite the fact that in 2008 he received that fan art. In 2008 he created the character. And I mean, the smoking gun was the fact that on the Wikipedia at one point on his page for Simonla, he directly listed Seaman Chew as her inspiration. And then when Evan started threatening him, he just took that off and said, after thinking about it, Seaman Chew was never an inspiration for Simonla, so I'm taking that off. And obviously that didn't work with Evan. So Evan now changed his mind to say he has to kill Simonla in the comic or he's going to sue him. So Chris refused to do that because he believes cartoon characters are real and exist in a parallel dimension, which is something he said before.
Yep.
And because he paired her up
merge.
with Wild Sonichu, which is another character in the comic, and he said breaking up that romance would be monstrous, is how he put it. So Alec began warning Chris in their phone calls that Evan was serious about the legal threats and he needed to do something, but Chris, I guess not grasping the seriousness of this situation, still refused to kill Simonla off. So eventually Evan had as much from this as he could possibly take. So he got his lawyers to lock the Wikipedia, which meant Chris could no longer post Sonichu or do anything like that. Although again, breaking character for a second because he was a troll like all these people were. The Wikipedia did get locked, but how he did that, no one really knows. Or maybe it's known, but I just don't know. He didn't actually have lawyers or anything, but just within this reality, he had lawyers. So Chris, realizing that there was nothing else he could do, agreed that he would finally kill Simonla. So he released pages from his then unfinished Sonichu issue 10, which had Simonla get killed in it. But the thing is, he had Simonla and Wild have a daughter named Sandy, who was basically just a clone of Simonla right before she died, which, made her death basically pointless. And so Evan, because again in real life he was never actually going to sue Chris, just decided he was done with this and left him alone. But anyway, moving on though to Sonichu 10, it was officially finished in February of 2010, and it was the longest issue of Sonichu up to that point, and only consisted of one episode because usually they have multiple episodes going on. So Chris decided he was going to take himself out of the comic, considering the fact that he finally agreed with people when they said the comic's just about him now and had nothing to do with Sonichu anymore. So he decided he would finally take out himself out of the Sonichu comic and just make it about Sonichu. But before he did, he wanted to settle all his debts with the trolls. So in this issue, among other things, he goes into the future to cure gay people with his blood because it's so straight that it can cure gay. He seriously said that. He destroyed the 4-cent garbage building and killed everyone inside, and then he brutally killed Alec, Evan, Mao, and Sean Watley after a sham trial for their crimes against him. Sean, he's not really that relevant, but he was a minor troll who he made this comic called Moon Pals, which was more of a comic strip comic that was about. Chris has this weird obsession with sending things to the moon. He once said he would send all cigarettes to the moon if he could because he hates cigarettes. And he once said some minor characters got sent to the moon, like Metal Sonichu and this character Yawning Squirtle, who was a Squirtle who was a stoner. And so the comic was just about all the crazy adventures that happened on the moon with a bunch of weed and cigarettes and all that up there. And also Sean was just famous for in the mailbags. He would constantly send emails to Chris that were like, hey, Chris, in Moon Pals, I'm going to have Crystal Weston Chandler get her head cut off, and she goes around killing people. Can you please do that in Sonichu, too, so there's no inconsistencies with our comics and stuff? And Chris would always say, no, I'm not doing that, the whole time. For some reason, he kept responding to those emails. He didn't just block them, but he would feature them as, fan emails, and would always just say, I'm not doing that. So Sean was one of the people he killed, too. So, at this point, it was kind of funny because he just abandoned any principles he had with Sonichu, because he used to say it was for kids, despite the fact that he had graphic sex scenes in one of them. But he said it was for kids and that he would never do blood and gore because that's disgusting and abhorrent. But he decided to do it. It was literally like torture porn he did to the 4 people he was mad at as revenge against them. So yeah, at this point, Chris, if it was not clear he was a hypocrite before, this kind of, proved that one. So that's kind of the end of the whole Asperger thing. I don't know. I just always find it funny how much crazy stuff was happening at the same time, and how Chris believed all of it was real. But anyway, so at this point, Chris seemed to not really have that much interest in Sonichu anyway, because he found a new potential sweetheart around this time. So he met this girl at like an adult social club he attended, who was pretty similar to Megan, because she actually did like him unironically and thought he was a nice person and all that. But she only was interested in being friends with him, and she was actually asexual, so she had no possible interest at all. I mean, Megan didn't really either, but she had like no interest in being Chris's girlfriend at any point. But Chris decided he was just going to hope she would change her mind if he like hung out with her enough, which kind of proves he didn't learn anything from what happened with Megan. So her real name is like public knowledge, like you can find it. And this is kind of jumping forward in time a bit, but she eventually requested the Quickie to remove all mention of her name, which they agreed to do. And from this point forward, she's usually referred to as the Wallflower, as like her nickname, which is after a quote Chris once said in reference to their relationship.
What did he say?
It was a quote that really didn't make any sense, but when he in the mailbag, because he was just straight up claiming she was his girlfriend, like on the mailbag, he's, "Oh, we're getting along like two hip wallflowers," what he said once, which makes like I don't even know what that means, but
Wallflower, that's an older thing.
Yeah, isn't that like a term for? Maybe I'm wrong, but isn't that a term for people who are like social, like
like outcasts.
antisocial? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know where he got that term, but that's how he described it. So she just gets referred to as the Wallflower.
Yeah.
So anyway, his friendship with the Wallflower, at least from what she knew, seemed to be going pretty good. And again, like she didn't know he was calling her his girlfriend in private, so she didn't have a problem with him yet. But until he released a video where he gave her pen name, she's like an author as well, or like she wasn't published or anything, but an author who had a pen name and all that. So anyway, this led to the trolls finding her private Facebook and posting her information all over the Quickie, and including her real name. And so a troll by the name of Surf Shack Tito, who had already hacked Chris's PSN, so he wasn't exactly on Chris's good side at this point, he sent her a link to the Quickie. So she discovered all this and assumed it was Chris's website and didn't know that he had no control over it. So she was angrily cut off all contact with him. And she was especially angry how, again, he referred to her as his girlfriend, as like a definitive statement when he thought she couldn't see what he was doing. So anyway, what happened next was Chris tried to reconcile with the Wallflower, but he couldn't change the Quickie, so there was basically nothing he could do. And so the Wallflower decided to contact the administration herself, which is when this rule took effect. So Surshak Tito decided to tell Chris that he was now dating the Wallflower and that he just needs to give up. And so Chris believed that, even though they never even met and she had no idea who that was at this point. And he said, "Don't trust Tito and please take me back." So the Wallflower was upset with Chris's persistence. Allegedly, he tried to call her at work or at her and stuff, which he denied. So I don't know, maybe that's not true. But she was just tired of him at this point. So she even at one point tried to say, "Yes, I am with Tito," just in hopes that would get Chris to quit, which did not happen. So anyway, Chris did eventually relent, but he just blamed the trolls and said it was her fault for having a Facebook page that the trolls could discover in the first place. So although realistically, it was just his fault for saying she was his girlfriend, because if he never did that, she wouldn't have been angry at him. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's funny how it's nearly a carbon copy of, besides not drawing porn this time, of what happened with Megan. So yeah, Chris often says that he learns from his mistakes, but again, if it's not clear already, he never learns from his mistakes. So anyway, around this time, the Wikipedia continued to just descend into chaos. Around this time, Mao took control of the website from the sysop and just...
Zedong?
No, Mao Ling. It was which, by the way, it's funny because he was a troll too, but that's the most stereotypical Chinese name they could have possibly chosen for him, and they still chose it, and Chris still believed. In fact, I didn't mention this once, but Ivy, who was one of Chris's past sweethearts, once claimed her roommate's name. She had a roommate who was Chinese named Ching Chong, and Chris completely believed that too. And once was this video is dedicated to a friend of my my sweetheart named Ching Chong. Yeah, he's not too bright. But anyway, Mao took control of the website from the sysop and opened it to edits from the public. So it was basically just vandalized beyond recognition, and it was basically unusable. So when Chris realized there was no hope of returning it to its former state, he just said, whatever, the troll's going to have it. So at this point, there was actually a bit of a debate over whether or not this meant Alec Benson Leary owned the copyright to Sonichu. Because, okay, first of all, I never mentioned this before because it's not really that relevant, but Chris technically has copyright to Sonichu, as in he went to the Virginia Library of Congress in 2009 and paid $20 to get Sonichu copyrighted, which is what he always claims is why Nintendo or Sony could never sue him, because he has the copyright to Sonichu or whatever. And it's really not legally binding at all. I mean, because Nintendo could still sue him despite that, but they just don't, because they probably just don't care, or they haven't seen it. But anyway, Alec technically could have done a thing where he said, no, because there's this weird thing where Chris's copyright was like linked to the Wikipedia or something, and the trolls were arguing, if you want to get technical, Alec, because Mao's working for Alec now owns Sonichu. So Alec could have tried to pull a, like, I own Sonichu now, and I'm going to sue you if you don't let me keep him. But he, again, because I guess everyone realized the lawsuit thing wasn't funny anymore, so they never did that. So anyway, around this time, Chris, I guess, finally seemed to realize that his presence on the internet was the cause of most of his problems and said he'd be leaving YouTube. And he said this several times before, so not that many people took it seriously. But this time he actually kept his word, and basically, besides, like, he was seen sometimes on online gaming, like dating sites and stuff, but he was basically gone from the internet for the time being. And he also changed his image a bit again to look more of like this weird trucker look. And he was seen at various community events in the Charlottesville area. So,
It's crazy.
yeah, he didn't really completely leave the internet. Well, I mean, he left the internet kind of, but he didn't leave the public eye completely. So anyway, in April 2010, Chris met another woman online named Jackie Rami, and the two began talking, although Chris finally seemed to learn a little bit and seemed to be kind of suspicious that she was a troll. So Jackie, a lot like Casey, spent most of her time trying to like get Chris to do things to improve himself. And she tried to get him to reconcile with Michael Snyder, who was the manager of the Game Place, which is, that game store that he got banned from.
Yep.
And she also requested he make various videos of like household tasks and all that. And so Chris only really sporadically did that. And so eventually Jackie became angry that Chris, wouldn't do what she wanted and that he wouldn't try to improve himself in any way. And so for the first time, I think in Chris history, actually, he broke things off with her because he just got tired of dealing with it.
Was Jackie real?
No, she was not. Basically, I don't think any of the like female characters in this were real. But
Even the wallflower?
oh no, she was real. But the people he met online, I think, unless I'm forgetting something, none of them were real. So anyway, they broke up for at least the time being, but that doesn't last forever. So anyway, during this time, there was a war brewing at the Game Place. So in June 2010, in a fit of he got drunk. Chris planned to go to the Game Place so he could take a photo of Michael Snyder to print out and put on a dartboard as revenge for banning him. So anyway, when Chris got there, he was confronted by several employees as well as Michael himself. So Chris tried to flee so he could but Michael tried to stop Chris so he could charge him with trespassing. But Chris in his getaway attempt nearly hit Michael with his car twice.
Wow.
So the police arrived and let him off with a warning, but told him to delete the photos and don't come back. I mean, there's kind of debate. I think most people agree Michael was in the right, and I agree that you should never run someone over or even try to. I mean, I think it is worth pointing out, though, to be fair, Michael allegedly tried to get Chris to like not leave so he could charge him with trespassing. So I know the truth of who's in the right is probably somewhere in between, but I mean, most people and I agree lean towards Michael. Mm. So anyway, in an effort to outsmart the trolls, which I don't really get because the trolls are kind of leaving him alone besides one-off things at this point. But anyway, Chris created his own troll persona called Jenkins Jinkies, which was the username. And his first act of trolling, if you want to call it that, was to post an article on the Quickie about an incident at Burger King that had nothing to do with anything really besides it vaguely. It was an article that was like, oh, the Burger King in Ruckersville has really bad service and there's old people keep yelling. Oh yeah, and Chris and Bob were there, I guess. And so that's how it relates to Chris. And so basically because of that and the way he typed, everyone just knew it was Chris right off the bat. But the trolls decided to have some fun with this and let Jenkins into the elite trolling forum, which they called the Trollin' Train, which is like a thing they made just for this purpose, messing with Chris. So that's where they said all the trolling attempts were planned. So Chris had to make an initiation video to join, which you might think might mean that Chris is screwed, but actually they said, oh, it's okay, because Chris, if he sees this, might go after you, so you can cover your face if you want. So this is the video. I'll watch part of it. And here it is.
For Floyd Cash and everybody else on the Quickie.
Mm-hmm.
I hate Christine Weston Chandler because he is a
You can see his man bra through his t-shirt.
The money is wasted on him. He doesn't have to work for this money.
Oh, he filmed this at a Goodwill, apparently, so it wouldn't be at his house.
But also, he is unfriendly to us males. He should be friendly to his males. Really ticks me off.
Really ticks me off.
Anyway, I have been touring him. I sent him nice emails in the beginning when I started reading the comics.
Okay, I mean, like, you can... Helen Keller could have told you this was Chris, all right? So that's...
That thing kind of makes him look like Sonic, too.
Yeah, and it's also funny that Jenkins Jinkies within the lore is supposed to... Chris said is 15 is how old is it? So that's apparently a 15-year-old.
Hey, could be.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of shocking how it sounds literally identical to Chris, except maybe a pitch lower.
You can't prove it.
Well, he admitted to it in emails to his friends who were also trolls, so that you can't actually prove it. But anyway, so Jenkins really didn't do anything in terms of trolling, which kind of just further proved it was Chris. And his main activities were just to try to tell the other trolls not to dig up Patty's corpse and to stay away from Chris's house. Because, okay, they were obviously not going to do it, but the trolls were like, because Chris thinks the trolls are like Spectre from James Bond, where they're planning like terrorist operations and stuff. And the trolls saying stuff like, let's dig up his dog's corpse and sell it on eBay and stuff. And Chris was just like, oh, I think that might be a bad idea. I don't know. So anyway, also Chris, for literally no reason, which is I think the funniest part of this whole thing, he made up this weird elaborate backstory for Jenkins where he was raped at summer camp when he was 7 and he had gay sex with his friends Jerry and Dino.
Whoa.
And so why this was necessary is anyone's guess. But literally like in his introduction post to the forum, he's like, I'm doing okay these days. I was raped at summer camp once, and also I did have gay sex with my friends once, but it's like no one asked you to say that, bro, but whatever. Anyway, so he eventually dropped the whole Jenkins Jinkies thing because he was afraid the police would raid the trolling train for him and he'd be mistaken as a troll and get arrested.
Wow.
Which I know that happened. But there was one other thing that happened on the trolling train forum that was pretty funny. So around this time, Clyde Cash is weird because I never mentioned this, even though he's Chris's greatest enemy probably, but the trolls keep thinking, oh no, Clyde Cash just died, he's been assassinated, or oh, he's back to life, or whatever. He faked his own death and all that. So at this point he was alive. So anyway, Clyde Cash was offering substantial rewards for anyone who could accomplish great feats of trolling, including a bounty of $9,001 for anyone who could destroy Chris's PS3. So Chris thought he could get one step ahead of the trolls by destroying it himself and claiming that Jenkins witnessed it as like his proof. So Chris filmed himself destroying the PS3 and then he demanded payment. And okay, he never got it. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. So anyway, Chris later claimed in an email that he was suffering from severe symptoms of withdrawal after being without it for just a few days. And he eventually just bought another one. Because at first he was trying to say, well, maybe it was a trick, but I think this is a good step in improving my life and showing that things aren't all about video games. And he gave that up after literally like 3 days. So yeah, he was trying to get up $9,000, but in actuality he was down about $300.
I get it.
So anyway, in August of 2010, for some inexplicable reason, Chris included Jackie's name in a shout out he did on the Nintendo DS application Flipnote Hatina. Do you remember that at all?
Kind of.
Yeah, well, he was like shouting out his friends or whatever, and he included Jackie, who he hadn't talked to for I think like 4 months at this point, or no, it's like 2 months.
Yeah.
And so that kind of rekindled. They got in contact again, and they soon restarted their relationship. And at this point, it just seemed like Chris was more willing to do whatever Jackie wanted at this point because. I didn't really mention this because there's not many specific things I can point to, but Chris was clearly like more lonely and desperate to get a girlfriend in the summer of 2010. So Chris made a series of pornographic drawings as requested by Jackie, and he made a lot of videos where he dressed up as fictional characters at her request. And so again, this kind of just proves Chris never learns from his mistakes because he never questioned why a woman would want him to dress up as Fred Flintstone and the Hamburglar in videos, but he still did it. But anyway, one of the probably the most famous example is when she once asked him to dress up as Chris Chan Sonichu. I didn't really explain this yet, but Chris Chan Sonichu in the comic is his Sonichu form.
Yep.
That's actually where the Chris Chan name came from, because originally he always just called himself Christian Weston Chandler, but his Sonichu nickname was just Chris Chan, and that's just the nickname he adopted as time went on. So this is a video of him transforming into Chris Chan Sonichu, I guess.
Hello, folks. Well, and now for something completely different. Electric hedgehog power. Pew!
So he painted himself blue and put some cones
This
on
would
his
be
head.
in my super mode. If I actually had the superpowers.
Oh, his headpiece
But I don't
keeps
in real
falling.
life.
But I don't in real life.
So I dress up like this anyway to, I don't know, just to say something or just to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, live an honest life. Don't curse. Don't badmouth people.
Okay, that's enough.
Live
get
an
the point.
honest life.
Yeah, live an honest life, man. I mean, I'm trying.
Why didn't he say any of those things in his what he's learned in his 18
Oh, I know
years or
that was all just "don't be gay" was his
Yeah.
message in that one. So
Where was that?
yeah, I don't know, man. He was a different person as Chris Chan Sonichu.
Huh.
But anyway, moving on. So anyway, throughout his relationship with Jackie, Chris was in this feud with her ex-boyfriend named Lars McNulty. So Jackie broke up with Lars because of his crippling obsession with model boats and for forcing her into an abortion without her knowledge. So anyway, by the end of October, Chris began to push back more on Jackie's suggestions. Finally, was like, no, I don't really want to do that. So their relationship began to wane a bit, and Jackie began to, on like a friendly basis, to reconnect with Lars. So Chris and Lars actually got on a call to kind of work their differences out. The call was like 2 hours, and I'm not going to go over it. And I've never even listened to the whole thing because it's so long. But just to break character, I mean, they ended on like a friendlier note and became friends. But anyway, to break character for a moment, the part of Lars was played by the same troll who played Alec Benson Leary. So if you ever want to listen to a call where a white guy says the N-word about 2,000 times to try to convince you he's black, then, oh, there you go.
Ugh.
So anyway, in November 2010, Jackie said she was still willing to be in a relationship with Chris, but he had to do as she asked and stop looking for ways out of it. So Chris finally put his foot down, and once again, he broke up with her, but said they could remain friends, which she accepted, but Chris actually requested they keep the option open to be friends with benefits. So Jackie was pissed about this and said she would never have sex with him, and she sent him a really long email that was basically chastising him for all his faults and his lies throughout the relationship. And again, like, some of them are valid, like, things he does wrong, but again, she was requesting he do videos where he freaking dresses up like Homer Simpson and stuff, so,
Yeah.
I mean, who's in the right here is, anyone's guess. But anyway, she also told him she was going to go back to Lars, and so anyway, Chris didn't take this well, and he angrily announced again that he was quitting the internet. And so to some Chris stories, depending on who you ask, this is the end of the classic era, which began back in October of 2007 with when he first got leaked on the internet. Although, to be fair, there's a lot of debate there's about now and a year from now is when people kind of debate when the classic era ended for various reasons. But so anyway, so this time Chris basically kept to his word when it came to leaving the internet, and he was barely seen by anyone outside of like online gaming. And so skipping through a few months from November 2010 to March 2011, there's basically very little known about Chris's life and what he was doing. And there were not even any Sonichu updates at this time. So, and I think he made maybe like 1 or 2 short YouTube videos, but it was nothing like he used to do. So anyway, in March 2011, though, he returned to the internet as a big change was taking place in his life that took basically everyone by surprise. So anyway, in March 2011, Chris reconnected with Jackie again. I don't even know why, but out of the blue. And he said he now identified as a tom girl, is how he put it, which is a term he made up, which is basically the male equivalent of like a tomboy. So Chris still said he was male and straight, and he didn't consider himself like trans or anything. But he now enjoyed dressing in women's clothing and using the female bathroom and wearing makeup and all that. So people still kind of debate like how he came to this conclusion about himself or what started this whole thing. But yeah, anyway, Chris sent some photos of his transformation to Jackie unsolicited. And you can take a guess, but they ended up on the quickie like the next day. So Chris still believed Jackie was real and just thought her email got hacked or whatever. And so anyway, she also conveniently just around this time broke up with Lars again. So at this point, they rekindled their relationship for like the 3rd time. So anyway, in May 2011, Jackie introduced Chris to this forum called Tomboys and Tomgirls of Virginia, where he could meet and talk to other people like him in Virginia without having his identity discovered. And much like Troll and Train, this was just a forum the trolls created to screw with Chris. So the forum provided a lot of interesting insight into what his life was like with the Tom girl thing, including, but not limited to, that his parents were vehemently against what he was doing, and he was once stopped by a cop when he tried to use the woman's bathroom. So anyway, in July, the forum was found by the trolls, and was leaked on the quickie, which led to Chris confessing his identity to his new friends. Oh, is someone there?
Yeah.
Ah,
Sure
okay.
Mikey's getting here.
Yeah, we'll let it's gonna be hard to explain this to him.
Yes, it is. Come on in.
Yo, hey,
I'm back.
Becky. Hey, you came at I'm glad you're here, but you came at a really bad. We're like 2/3 into the Chris Chan presentation. Oh crap! What the hell?
Oh no.
Oh, okay, there we go. We're fit. So, okay, Mikey's here, everybody. Say hello to Mikey. But anyway, Mikey.
Hello.
So, Christian, I don't know how to really start explaining this. You're not going to understand all of it. But basically, as you know, I made this really long presentation on Chris Chan, the internet lolcow, and I'm giving it to Jack and the viewers to learn about Chris Chan and become as autistic about him as I am.
We've mentioned Chris Chan to you before, right?
Yeah.
You thought he was the president at one point.
Yeah.
But okay, Chris Chan. So Chris Chan,
A president.
There's no way I can explain everything that's going. So here's the thing: feel free to ask questions and interject or whatever when I'm going.
Okay.
And the only way to explain it without having to go too deep is Chris is just a guy who gets made fun of on the internet and trolled a lot, and he makes the Sonichu webcomic of a combination of Sonic and Pikachu. So at this point.
And the rocks. Don't forget about the rocks.
That is the rocks. Yeah, the rocks that I got. He makes the rocks. So at this point in the story, Chris is recently going through a transformation where he calls himself we're in like summer of 2011 at this point. So Chris recently went through a transformation where he refers to himself as a tom girl now, which is a term he made up, which is a man who's straight, but like, you know how a tomboy is like a traditionally masculine woman? Mm-hmm. He's like a traditionally feminine man, which means he like wears makeup and tries to go in the women's bathroom and stuff. So, but he still considers himself straight and male and all that. So it's not like transgenderism. It's just how his like image, I guess. And right now, so a forum was made by trolls were called Tomboys and Tomgirls of Virginia, where he put a lot of his information. Like he started anonymously in his own mind, starting talking about how his parents were against this whole thing and how he was harassed by cops trying to go in women's bathroom and stuff or whatever. And so the forum got leaked, and the Quickie, which is like the Chris Chan Wiki, which also does a lot of the trolling, posted a lot of this information. But Chris had to confess his identity to his new friends, as he would put it. But they claimed that they had some information on technology and they'd be able to help him seek revenge against the trolls once and for all. So anyway, Chris returned to YouTube after like nearly a year in August 2011 with a vengeance, because he claimed to now have many of the trolls' real names and identities, and he would dox them unless they gave in to his demands, apologized to him, and then left the internet forever. So these identities were just, in most cases, just random people on the internet that the other trolls in the forum told him were the real trolls. And none of the trolls gave in to Chris's demands, as you could probably guess, which led to Chris to dox, quote unquote, all of them. Although most of the real people who he like doxed like either didn't see this or like didn't care or responded so they weren't the troll. So anyway, Chris was right about to expose Blue Spike's real identity, which if you remember was the Julie troll, who was like that guy who faked being a girl and he was really 13 and forced Chris to shove the Sancho medallion up his ass and all that.
These trolls are, I think, on the same level of bad as Chris.
I think most
Definitely.
of them are. Yeah,
Definitely.
Most of them are, but the only difference is they're funny a lot of the time. I mean, that doesn't make it right. That's not right. But I do agree most of the trolls are as bad as Chris.
I think Chris
or at
is
least
hilarious.
close.
Do you not?
Not unironically. But anyway, moving on here. He was about to expose Blue Spike, but then something took place that just kind of stopped the calling out videos. So on September 6, 2011, Bob, who's Chris Chan's dad, died of congestive heart failure at the age of 84. And this brought an end to the calling out videos and basically, once again, Chris's activity for the immediate future. So Jackie called Chris shortly after this, who was Chris's troll girlfriend at the time, which is like a troll pretending to be his girlfriend. But Chris spent most of the call just like crying and sad, obviously because his father just died. So the trolls never released the call because they just saw it as too soon and to start trolling him, and it wasn't funny.
Too soon.
And so there's a lot of debate over whether or not the trolls who did it like destroyed the audio or if they still have it somewhere. I remember when Chris, in the future, I'm not going to spoil it, although Jack already knows, did a very unforgivable act. There was a lot of debate of should they just release it for history's sake, as Chris lost any sympathy he might possibly have at this point. But it's still never been released, which means some people just think it was destroyed or it's lost. But anyway, this is the event that marked. There was some debate over when him and Jackie broke up the second time, if that was the end of the classic era. But basically, all the trolls agree at this point that the classic era was done, and this is the last date people usually give as the end of the classic era. Because basically, all the trolls from like the golden age of trolling just quit because they said things were different now, and trolling Chris wasn't funny anymore, so they were just going to leave him alone. And so as for Bob himself, I mean, I didn't really talk about him a lot because he's not super relevant here, but his legacy is pretty controversial among historians and the trolls and all that. Because a lot of people remember him as like a hardworking, man who did his best to shape Chris into a good person. But others see him as like a racist, paranoid coot who helped create Chris that we know today, who can't stand up for himself and, until he was forced out, lived with his parents. So regardless, though, he is remembered as a way better parent than Barb, who's like, I don't really go into why, but she's like, Barb is a lot more like manipulative and, nuts and not qualified to have a kid. So
she's a hoarder too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bob is remembered as the better parent of the two, but there's a lot of debate over whether or not he could be considered like a good parent. So anyway, around the time of Bob's death and the end of the trolling, I think Chris probably had the best chance of his life to just leave the internet and just start things anew. But he did not do that. On October 28th, 2011, which was barely a month after Bob died, Chris heard the game place was under new management, so he went to see if he could come back. And unfortunately, the new owner was Michael Snyder, who was the manager who had Chris banned originally. So Chris was told to leave, but before he did, he took several photos of Michael. Whether or not he tried to pin him on a dartboard like the last photos, I don't know. But he took a bunch of photos of Michael and the inside of the store. So when leaving the store, Chris decided to pull his favorite party trick and hit Michael with his car this time. And then he and Barb, who was with Chris, switched seats. And this is another one of the reasons why people think she's a way worse parent than Bob. She hit Michael with the car. So anyway, the Chandlers didn't get too far before the police came, and they promptly arrested the both of them. And this was probably the first real piece of legal trouble Chris was in for his entire life. So, okay, Jack knows this guy, so this is kind of
Oh my
interesting.
gosh, I forgot about this guy.
So Chris and Barb spent the night in jail, but they got bailed out by Rocky Shoemaker, who was Chris's pastoral counselor. Who, if you remember back in part 1, she was the one who tried to first get legal action against the trolls, but it didn't work really.
Yeah.
So anyway, Michael sued Chris and Barb, who then hired Rob Bell, who was a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, as their attorney. You know this guy, right? You've met him, right?
I've talked to him on the phone.
Yeah. So Chris, this is Jack's first kind of part in Chris story, and he comes in again. So we'll get to that.
Interviewed him
Jack's a reoccurring character
because he's now like he's in government now.
Yeah, he was back then.
Wait, how did you interview him?
Like I asked.
What
for school?
What was it? Wait, so how big on the government totem pole was he?
He's like a member. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, he's local government.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's within
like state
district.
Like,
yeah, he's like in the state House of Representatives.
Okay, so it's a little bit more doable than like the president.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So anyway, there was a series of. Originally, Barb and Chris wanted to plead not guilty, but Rob told them they should take a plea deal because there's basically no judge in the world, given the circumstances, who would find them not guilty. So after a series of court appearances in July 2012, the two of them were sentenced to community service and probation time and a suspended jail sentence, which they never served. So Chris to this day maintains Rob was a wimp for not fighting for a not guilty verdict. Although, like, there's no one who could have bailed him out of this one. Yeah. I mean, he hit a man with his car because of a freaking ban from a video game store. Like, there was no one who could have saved him this time. So 2012 to 2013, and this I'll say this real quick because this is like the first time I'm just skipping over just years. Like I used to have like multiple slides on 1 year about events going on. To be fair, this is a point where I'm somewhat biased in terms of I just don't know as much about Chris since Bob died as before he died, because even though that's when I started following Chris, but also because Chris had a lot less going on, because like I said, the trolls were bothering him a lot less at this point. So even though there's like 13 years left, we're going to get through it a lot faster than part 1 because a lot of the years there's just not much that happened. So anyway, so 2012 and 2013 were basically pretty quiet years in Chris story, where there was basically very little online activity, and I don't think any YouTube videos getting posted. Although Chris seemed to be entering, it was kind of sad, like a very depressed state with the loss of Bob and then the recent legal problems and still no sweetheart likely causing it. And so the one big event that really happened those 2 years was he finally, after nearly 10 years of trying, lost his virginity, although it was to a hooker. I mean, it seemed to improve his mood somewhat. He seemed to get a bit happier around this time, but it was not enough for him to either return to YouTube or Sonichu.
I'm remembering a story. Can you go back to Rob Bell?
I can do it real fast.
Yeah. So Kopitz made a video called the Co-Olympics once.
We watched that.
Yeah, that I'm in, and at one point in the video, there's a belly slapping competition where we slap our bare bellies and do a decibel.
I remember
test.
that. Yeah.
And Rob Bell once came to our school to like look at all of our projects, and Kopitz showed him that video.
Yeah.
So Rob Bell was sat there. Chris Chan's lawyer watched me and Kopitz slap our bellies together.
Well, that was definitely the craziest thing you saw. You know?
Not like together, like we slapped our belly to belly. It was like
I saw the video. Yeah, man.
But to the listeners,
we should up the ante and I'll do belly to belly.
Yeah, let's do it. Next episode, I'm totally free.
Send it to Rob Bell.
Yeah, see what he thinks. Look at my lawyer, dog. I'm going to jail. But anyway, so in 2014, there was a really sad start where I was on January 10th, Chris's house caught fire after an extension cord for a coffee maker in the bathroom got wrapped around the door and frayed. So the massive hoard that Barb keeps, because Barb's a massive hoarder, and other crap cluttered in the house, created like a kindling for the fire. So Chris and Barb stayed in a rental house until the house was repaired. And Chris publicly blamed Keurig for the fire, and not the fact that he tried to wrap an extension cord around a door. So, yeah, take that for what you will. So anyway, in August 2014, Chris finally started a new relationship with a woman named Catherine. Although around this time, Chris did just start identifying as a trans woman instead of just a tom girl, which is how he identifies to this day. And a member of the LGBT community, although he maintained for a while his hatred for gay men. Like, he said, like, I guess it's okay that they exist, but I still hate them, you know? Because he's always had this weird hate for gay men, specifically.
Just because his parents probably taught him that.
That is it likely comes from Bob and Barb, because they were Bob at least especially was very homophobic.
Yeah.
And just because I said it in the last episode, but Chris technically goes by any pronouns, is what he said, and just because it's how the vast majority of the online discourse around Chris is, I'm still referring to him as he, him. If he did not say that, I would have shown respect and referred to him as she, her, but because he said he uses any pronouns now, that's why I'm doing that, in case people are weirded out, I guess. But anyway, so little's really known about the relationship with Catherine, besides the fact that she, like Emily, was a troll from the last episode. She was a troll who was a real woman and went on an actual date with him, but she was still like a troll at the end of the day. So this was the first major trolling effort basically since like 3 years, since Jackie probably. So anyway, on Chris's dating profile where he met Catherine, for some reason he said he was looking for a, quote, open relationship. And a lot of people thought he just didn't know what that meant. I mean, it's possible that he did, but people feel like he just didn't know what that term meant. So anyway, the trolls decided to introduce a new party into the Catherine relationship with, in September 2014, Catherine went to New York and took a sailing trip with this guy named Colin, who was like a wealthy, good-looking man. So Chris was assured of, even though he was told Colin was a good guy and he wasn't going to try anything funny with Catherine, he was not convinced by that. So he got Colin's email and started arguing with him and told him to back off, but this did little to fix the situation. So Catherine got angry at Chris about this and broke up with him, which ended another one of the troll relationships once again. So anyway, Chris didn't have long to dwell on this, though, because he found a new outlet for his rage around this time. So the new Sonic Boom video game and TV show came out, which featured like a redesigned version cast of the characters. Chris was outraged that Sonic now had blue arms instead of the tannish arms he used to have, which is like one of the most like ridiculous things he got mad at. But he was like genuinely like pissed that Sonic's arms changed color. But it just kind of proved how, like, again, I try to be objective, but this just kind of just proves how stupid Chris is. I mean, let's just be real here. So Chris protested these changes throughout most of 2014, and he spent a lot of time vandalizing Sonic Boom games and ordering Sega change the arms back. But the protests were probably annoying to Sega, but like I don't really think they cared at all. But what Chris did next in his protest crossed the line here. So on December 26, 2014, Chris went to GameStop, and he'd already been banned for vandalizing Sonic Boom stuff, so he was told to get out. So after arguing with the management, he left. But on the way out, he pepper sprayed an employee there. And he claimed he did this in self-defense, but anyone who like watches the video of the pepper spraying incident, because there's a video of it, like can tell that the employee did nothing that would have made this self-defense.
That's my childhood GameStop too.
Yeah, Chris went there and pepper sprayed a GameStop employee.
That could have been me.
Yeah, could have been you, Rowan. It's like when you realize you were supposed to be on one of the planes from 9/11, but you missed your flight.
I was 1.
Yeah, you were 1. No, you were like 26, bro. Don't lie. But anyway, so Chris left the mall.
Right now.
Yep, it's true. So anyway, he left the mall and he drove home. He forgot that he left Barb there, by the way, so she was stranded there. And he was arrested and he spent the weekend in jail this time. So after another series of hearings, Chris was found guilty in October 2015, and he just had to pay a fine. But anyway, Chris learned nothing from this, and he maintained Sega, it was their fault for changing Sonic's arms in the first place instead of, coming to terms with the fact that he pepper sprayed an innocent man over a cartoon character. And also, yeah, Chris unironically said about it at one point, I was the victim. That's how he put it.
Yep.
So anyway, here's the video of it. It's like 10 seconds long, but it's hard to really tell what's going on, but just in case you want to see, here's the video of him pepper spraying it.
Don't call anybody.
There he is leaving. And the yellow guy is the one who gets pepper sprayed.
And that was the bar too.
And he just leaves. He just walks out. So, yeah, Chris pepper sprayed a GameStop employee over a cartoon character.
Yep.
So anyway, in 2015, that was another just relatively uneventful year in Chris Chan history. Although the biggest development was Chris finally seemed to start like caring about Sonichu again, and he started work on Sonichu 11 once again. And he also created Sonichu merchandise that was available for purchase online around this time. But also Chris seemed to take more of an interest in politics, and he got really upset about Donald Trump because this is around the time he started first running for president. But it's kind of funny though, because Chris's like rage against Trump, it was mostly for stuff like he was guilty of himself, which is some examples are he criticized Trump for being creepy around women, being egotistical, and probably most hypocritically, and this is a quote from Chris, not being able to take a parody of himself in jest. Which is funny because Chris, like, bro, he sent death threats to Alec Benson Leary for making a very, like, light parody of him in Asperchew. And anytime anyone, like, parodies Sonichu or whatever, he starts screaming about it and saying how it's bullying or whatever. So it's just kind of funny how, like, hypocritical he was about it. He disagreed with Trump on, like, some, like, political reasons. Yeah, basically he mostly just raged against Trump for things he's done himself, which is kind of funny. But anyway, so starting in 2016, it seemed the Chandlers, who were never really particularly wealthy in the first place, had finally hit rock bottom, with much of Chris's online videos during this time and from this point forward for a while being just begging for money and for people to buy his merch. And so the main reasons for this are basically Barb spent nearly all of the inheritance Bob left them on Rob Bell's legal fees, and Chris's wastefulness with money for many years, like, finally catching up with him. Because he'd spent a ridiculous amount of money on, like, toys and video games and porn, which is basically ever since he had an income, those were the three main things he always spent money on. So anyway, this era was nicknamed by Christorians, but the financial crisis is what they usually call it, which lasted for about 5 years. And so interestingly, whenever Chris did receive money that wasn't in Barb's oversight, he mainly just spent it on, like, again, more toys and video games and, well, porn. So,
yeah, those are Mikey's big three.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, who doesn't like that? So anyway,
a three-headed monster.
Yeah, that's where my money goes. But anyway, so in February 2017, Chris began this weird fixation on this personality from Planet Dolan called Doopy Do-Over. I don't really know anything about Planet Dolan. I know they were like this big channel in like 2016 or so.
Yeah, it was animated, right?
I think so, yeah. But it was this channel, I guess, I don't know what it was. It was like a bunch of people on it. I saw their videos recommended a lot back then, but I don't know if they're still around, and I don't really know what they did. But there was this girl who was a part of it called, her username was Doopy Do-Over. And so whether or not he saw her as like a potential sweetheart is up for debate, but he mostly just, I mean, he claimed he only saw her as like another artist and potential friend, and he knew that she already had a boyfriend. But many observers found how he was acting around her like just kind of creepy. By the way, interestingly enough, this is the first saga I was around for, so this is when my knowledge with Chris Chan starts. So anyway, which means I was following Chris when I was like 14, which is kind of pathetic, but whatever. So anyway, he subscribed to her Patreon because she's like an artist outside of Planet Dolan. And he donated $50 a month to her during the financial crisis, which is pretty shocking. And he began responding to her tweets pretty regularly. So Doopy like knew who Chris was and tried to be courteous and accept his patronage while also not getting too close. But Chris often started like emailing her through her work email as well, trying to ask like personal questions and just kind of abused her charity. So anyway, Chris kind of crossed the line with Doopy when in August 2017 he included her on a tweet about National Girlfriend Day, along with a bunch of other women who he'd never met, who were people he kind of knew online. So anyway, I guess Doopy kind of just realized there was no way this was going to end well no matter what. So she asked Chris to end his patronage to her. Like, she's trying to be nice about it. She wasn't doing it rudely, but she said, like, please end your patronage to me and I'll give you a refund, and I'm not going to like, I'll still make like the pieces or whatever you commissioned to me, but like, don't stop giving me money. And so Chris I guess he was able to understand there was harassment against Doopy happening from trolls and all that. So he started this campaign on Twitter telling the trolls to harass him directly and leave his, again, quote-unquote friends alone. You possibly just kind of thought this was like an act of... People think he was doing this like an act of gallantry, so she would see how like brave he is and all that. Because he's saying, you talk directly to me, leave my friends alone. And he thought that would make her like fall in love with him. And again, this is what people say. I don't know what his real motives were. But anyway, the whole saga ended when Doopy just, again, realized it was never going to end well. So she just blocked Chris on Twitter and Patreon when he started doing this. So Chris at this point still tried to claim that like they were still friends, and he didn't get the hint. So Doopy had to just straight up tell him like, I'm not your friend and leave me alone and we're never going to be friends. So at this point, that's 3 times in less than 10 years, Chris was able to completely like alienate a woman who didn't mind him at first by just taking things way too far. So that's got to be a record. I don't know. So anyway, in September 2017, Chris began a relationship with his longtime Facebook friend, Jessica Quinn. So the relationship with Jessica was pretty low-key, and it didn't really have much notable stuff happening like the other relationships, kind of like the Catherine thing. Although it was notable that Jessica had a fat fetish, apparently, which influenced Chris to do a storyline in Sanchu 12 where Rose Chu gets fat. So it only took 13 years from Sanchu to go from some guy's wish fulfillment where he like beat up his enemies and all that to straight-up fetish porn at this point, which is pretty funny. So anyway, they broke up later that month because Chris made a sock... he made a sock puppet Twitter account to follow all the people who blocked him, including Doopy, which is like just pathetic and just shows Chris can never let go. So anyway, Jessica later agreed to take Chris back, but this time he had to like permanently unfollow Doopy and the others, which was probably to her relief, to be honest. But anyway, in October 2017, Jessica's Facebook page was hacked by trolls, leading her to break up with Chris permanently this time, and said it was his fault for creating a Kiwi Farms account to try to get on friendly terms with some of the trolls. Which I mentioned it a few times, but since I never really said what it is, Kiwi Farms is like a forum for like just online trolling, which is where a lot of the actual trolling efforts against Chris were planned, I guess. Not actually on Troll and Train. They just made that up to mess with Chris. But anyway, not much came of the breakup, except Chris made like a full-on rage video, which was his first in like 7 years at this point. And he basically outed Jessica as having a fat fetish, if that wasn't clear enough already, by posting photos of like his gigantic gut and saying could have, quote, been hers. So in many ways, this was kind of the end of an era because this is the last time Chris would ever begin a relationship with a troll like this again. And some speculated he made comments kind of saying, I've realized I don't need a significant other to complete my life. I could be happy on my own, which made people think he was just giving up on the love quest, realizing, like, I mean, this is like really sad to say, but he was just never going to get a girl. Mary Lee Walsh was right when she said he was never going to get a girlfriend this way or anyway. So he finally just realized that. I mean, it's a sad thing to say, but that is just kind of the truth at this point. So a lot of people speculated this was just the end of the love quest and he would never again look for a girlfriend. But in a matter of time, though, the observers found out how wrong he really was. They really were. So this is when things get really confusing because there's a lot of information that's still not even public yet. But in November 2017, Chris began making these really weird videos where he made references to like Nazis and anime and stuff like he clearly knows nothing actually about. And he began drastically changing Sonichu canon to say stuff like Ted Bundy is a Sonichu character who's like, and that he's like he was framed for murder and all that, and saying that like, I mean, none of this is like necessarily wrong, but just Chris would never do this before, saying like Rose Chu is trans and stuff, and saying all this like weird stuff. So a lot of people realized they didn't know who, but they figured out there was some new troll who was working their influence on Chris. So this was the work of the Idea Guys, as they're called, which are a group of trolls who began feeding Chris information about Quickville and other like general history that he just believed for some reason. So they mostly did this like role playing as fictional characters from Sonichu and other media. And so why Chris believed them so completely is still up for a debate. And there's a lot of factors to it probably, but a lot of them believe it was just because Chris had used Quickville and like Sonichu as like a coping mechanisms for so long that whenever people told him like facts about Quickville, he just believed it as true and wouldn't question it. And so the pictures I have on screen are like two of the Idea Guys. And I don't really mind saying their names because they are like really, I'll get into it, but they are really bad. Probably the worst trolls, to be honest. Joshua Wise and Stephen Boyd were the name of two of the Idea Guys. And they've been like doxxed and all that. And I'm not saying, and I obviously don't encourage that, but they have been like doxxed and harassed and all that for this. So anyway, the Idea Guys, basically among their changing of Sonichu lore, they also convinced Chris that he was now a goddess and that he was married to 4 fictional cartoon characters, which is what ended the love quest, at least for now. So this was the actual end of the love quest. And told him he was bisexual this whole time. And so the Idea Guys also committed many illegal acts in Chris, like embezzling over $6,000 from him by convincing like they were going to destroy Quickville if he didn't. So anyway, at this point, the Idea Guys are probably the most hated trolls in Christory, or at least up to this point. Although they taking the spot that probably like Blue Spike had before this for, you know, again, getting Chris to shove the Sonichu medallion up his ass and all that. So in January 2018, a group called the Guard Dogs, who were 3 like influential people in Christory, banded together to remove the Idea Guys from power. And so 2 of the Idea Guys, like I said before, got doxxed, but apparently there were at least 4 of them in total, and who the other 2 are, or the other ones are still anonymous. So the majority of people don't know who they were still, but 2 of them got doxxed. So the Guard Dogs did try to take legal action against the Idea Guys, but for some reason nothing ever came of it. And even though they were like removed from power and Chris said, "Oh, that was bad what they did to me. Yeah, that was really bad." He still believed all that stuff they told him and still does to this day. So at this point, Chris is basically just a completely different person from this point on. He went from like a goofy cartoon-like man-child who had somewhat of a grip on reality. So, I mean, before that, his craziest delusion was that he did still believe cartoon characters existed in another dimension. But now he went to some guy who believed he thinks he can go between other dimensions and that he has powers and all that. But if it makes any difference, though, I mean, Chris seemed happier believing this than he had at like any point in a long time. So I don't know. There's that, I guess. All right, this is a fun thing coming. I remember what's next on this actually. So this is like a quick aside here, and I wasn't gonna. And I don't say this to be disrespectful. No offense, but this is the Kopitz thing. I'm gonna mention Kopitz, and I don't mean any disrespect to Kopitz, but if you didn't know Kopitz, and I don't say this again to be rude, but I probably wouldn't have mentioned the Kopitz videos in this slideshow if like it wasn't personal. Just because like a lot of people made videos with Chris and some of them got more attention than others. But I did want to mention them because, you know, you're involved. This is how you're involved. So around, I think, and correct me if I have any of this wrong, but around May of 2018, Kopitz, who's like a YouTuber, he began correspondence with Chris and made a few videos just like hanging out with him and interviewing him and that kind of thing. So the videos were notable for actually being one of the few instances at the time where a YouTuber made videos with Chris no one is like friends with Chris unironically, but he was still hanging out with Chris and just trying to have fun with him and be nice, not trying to troll him. Although some people on Kiwi Farms didn't like that and were critical of the videos, saying that, like, Chris, you should be critical of him if you're hanging out with him, but, like, whatever, that's like a separate debate. So anyway, also the famous IMDb certified actor and the boy genius Jack Kircher was involved with the production of some of these. You filmed some of them, right? Wasn't that your role?
I filmed one, yeah.
Yeah, so Jack Kircher, this is how he's involved with Chris Chandler. So yeah, he was involved with some of these videos, so that's his part. So anyway, in June 2018, Chris made one of his first highly publicized public appearances, where he attended the Too Many Games convention in Oaks, Pennsylvania. So Chris began this new habit brought on by believing he was bisexual now. Although, to be fair, people can debate whether or not he's always been bisexual, and this is just when he came out, or if he was just tricked into believing it by the Idea Guys. But anyway, he started kissing fans of both genders on the cheek when greeting them now. And this didn't sit right with most of the people there who, he kissed, and a lot of them complained to staff. So Chris was warned to stop, and Chris claimed he was never warned to stop, but the convention managers, who are obviously more credible sources on this, claimed he was told to stop. So anyway, if he either forgot or chose to ignore that. So after being warned, he was kicked out of the convention, where he proceeded to make a fool of himself by curling up on the floor and crying. And the cops got called, but he left before he could possibly, get arrested for a third time. So anyway, on a side note, this is something someone brought up, and it's like the woman you can see in the photo who's like kneeling down with him. The mother of an autistic child was one of the attendees who like comforted Chris during this meltdown, which kind of just shows how much of a, at heart, Chris is still a child. So anyway, in October 2018, Chris began to believe in the concept of a dimensional merge, as he called it, which is an event in which our reality, which is dimension 1218, as he calls it, and the reality containing all cartoon worlds called dimension C197 would collide. So to this date, he still believes this is like an apocalyptic event that was going to happen. And it was originally supposed to happen on December 31st, 2018. And Chris warned like half of our reality would die and half the cartoon reality would die. And predictably, this event never happened. And Chris, very similar to like a preacher who predicts the rapture and always gives excuses to why it doesn't happen, he still believes it's coming, but it's just been delayed or whatever.
What if he's right?
Well, that would be I remember going to bed that night thinking well, damn, what if he's right? Because I was following at this point. I was like, is this going to happen? Is he right? And
watch him be right. Out of all
well,
the
there was this
religions.
one, I didn't include this, but there was this one site where he once tried to claim it was going to happen in 2038. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts claiming, oh yeah, it's going to happen 2038 now, because that's just when it's happening. Because it's kind of crazy, but we're not that far from being closer to 2038 than 2018. So, so he might start claiming it. I don't know. So anyway, and I know we're still like 6 years from now, but we really don't have that many slides left actually, because of how not dense the events in Chris's life were at this point. So in June 2019, and this is one of the trolls where I really don't know a lot about, even though he was pretty influential, I guess, but and I really don't even know what his motives were. But this troll named Jacob Sockness began getting Chris's attention on Twitter and other social media, and he had been active since 2018, but he only seemed to become relevant to Chris around then. So Jacob's motives aren't really clear for what he was doing. He portrayed himself as a true fan of Chris and Sonichu and a believer in the dimensional merge. But he also seemed interested in trying to start a sexual relationship with Chris, and even went as far as to try to travel from Virginia to have sex with, or travel to Virginia to have sex with him. So in an unusual moment of clarity, actually, Chris prevented Jacob from meeting him in September, although they maintained sporadic contact until July of 2020, until Chris just blocked him for he started claiming Chris had an illegitimate child with the prostitute who took his virginity, and that teed Chris off, so he blocked him, and that was the end of that. So 2020 was another pretty dull year in Chris' story, despite all the events happening in the world. Chris spent most of the year claiming he had body swapped with Sonichu, as he put it, which was a coping mechanism for the amount of conventions that he planned to attend being canceled. So interestingly enough, despite how much Chris hated Trump when he got elected and all that, Chris didn't really seem to care when he got defeated by Joe Biden that year. And when asked, he stated he didn't vote for Joe Biden. He wrote in Lisa Simpson for president. Which signifies how much his interest in real life politics just dwindled to where he preferred to just play pretend with the cartoon characters. Also, it's kind of funny that the data really showed in Ruckersville, which is where Chris lives, there were 2 write-in votes total. One was Chris. People were saying if he just convinced Barb to vote for Lisa Simpson too. So I don't know, maybe he did. So anyway, besides turning down Jacob, Chris didn't really have much interaction with the trolls in 2020. But there was a certain group, which I guess you might qualify as trolls, that he made contact with. So in September 2020, Chris began associating with this group called Prater, which is a company that had the aim of producing Sonichu merchandise at a much larger scale than Chris could on his own, while also giving him a percentage of the profits. So Prater also helped Chris set up other events in his life, such as a sermon, as he put it, at the Goochland Library in October 2020, where he just kind of rambled about the dimensional merge and stuff. So Chris is still in cahoots with Prater to this day, and whether they've been good or bad or just a bunch of trolls or whatever, that's kind of just up for debate at this point. So anyway, in January 2021, a troll by the name of Larry Vaughn, which is the name of the mayor from Jaws, Jaws the shark movie, and that's the photo he used of him, a photo of the character. He tried to pull what I guess you could call the Idea Guy 2.0, and anyway, he started sending these he manipulated Chris into sending these weird sexually charged and religious statements to people on Twitter, including now President-elect Joe Biden, who he never responded to this, which is kind of one of the biggest failures of his administration is he never responded to the weird sexual messages Chris was sending him for whatever reason. So anyway, why he did this is unclear, and I don't know how people got, but these like leaked plans from Larry seem to reveal he was trying to pull he was trying to set up for like another online girlfriend thing against Chris. But Chris eventually just learned to ignore Larry, so this whole thing was basically pointless. But I just bring it up because it was like one of the last times like an old style troll got in contact with Chris. So anyway, okay, things are getting dark pretty fast now. So anyway, in July 2021, things from the outside seemed to actually be going pretty well for Chris because he was fulfilling his commission requests and his income stream actually improved quite a bit. And he was actually planning to go to the Everfree Northwest convention in Seattle, which was like a My Little Pony convention. After like BronyCon ended, I guess is what they started doing. Like, they were like just fan meetups and stuff. So anyway, behind the scenes, though, Chris was finally just feeling the toll of being without a real partner for basically his entire life at this point. And he often like lamented his loneliness to his online associates, mostly like Prater and all that. And while he still claimed he was married to a bunch of cartoon characters, he like acknowledged in a way that they were not real, I guess, and that they didn't exist in this world, and that he was hoping someone in this dimension would start a relationship with him. So, I mean, obviously most people weren't surprised when they found out, because this wasn't found out until much later he was saying these kind of things. And while most people weren't surprised by it, Chris decided he had to relieve his sexual repression. And so how he did that was a shock to most people. So on July 29th, 2021, a call was leaked between Isabella Loretta Janke, who was like an associate with Prater, and Chris, where he admitted to her he had been having sex with Barb for over a month at this point.
His mother.
Yeah. And anyway, the call was like, it caused shockwaves throughout the internet and led to more interest probably in Chris than like any other time in his history on the internet, which is funny because most people think of like the main time of Chris being relevant was like 2007 to like 2009. But no, this was like the biggest increase in attention for Chris in history. This is like, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but this is like my 9/11, honestly. Like I still remember what I was doing and where I was. Like it was the summer of 2021. I had a few weeks till college started. I woke up, I was like scrolling social media on my phone, and I remember I saw a meme it was one of those memes like, this guy is banging his mother, and you're just like stupid, or it had like bad words, and it was a photo of Chris Chan, like one of those porn site memes. I was like, oh, that's funny, it's a Chris Chan meme, okay. And then like 3 posts down, I saw that photo from Sonichu without any context of like, yes, my love quest is finally over. And I was like, okay, this is not normal. Okay, what's going on here? Like I had to. It
was trending on Twitter.
Yeah, and I felt like my heart stopped for a second. I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I looked up Chris Chan, and I found out.
Heart stopped.
I was like, okay, something happened here. What's going on? Why are all these Chris Chan memes getting posted all the time? And I looked it up, and that's when I found out that Chris was banging his own mother, and
it was shocking to you. It really affected you.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, people speculate. Should we have seen this coming? Because it's been observed that Chris and Barb are like closer than a mom and a son should be, probably. Like, and a lot of that's actually Barb's doing. Where Barb did things. Okay, I'm not going to make any allegations, but like could be considered like sexual abuse to Chris at a young age. Like, for example, when he was an adult and the house burnt down, or at one point when like they were moving stuff in the house or something like that, she started forcing him to sleep in her bed because she claims because he needed to be closer in case she needed something. But no, they started, and apparently they started spooning, is how it was put, even though, again, they're a mother and son. And Chris also took to a habit of calling Barb, like, darling and stuff, instead of, like, mother. And Chris also, he once told the story of how when he told his mom he had lost his virginity because he banged a prostitute, Barb's response was apparently to say, just straight up, I would have had sex with you.
Whoa,
and people debate maybe that she meant, like, because Barb also always compliments Chris on, like, his looks and says he's handsome, which... I don't think really that's that out of the ordinary for like a mother to say about her son just to be nice, but
like she said like, oh, I would have done it, or like
she was trying to say like, I don't know why you paid for a prostitute, anyone would have done it, you know? But she also again could have meant, and also Chris tried to make the claim Barb initiated it with him, and again I don't know how much of this is true, but these are just things he said. So anyway, the next day Chris was removed from 14 brand. I didn't really finish my thought, but my point was just that maybe I think that and also because once Chris claimed that he had a dream of having sex with Barb. And also there was that story I told you once that I didn't say on the air, so let's repeat, where once he was talking to the troll who played Emily, because she like took on various personas in Chris's life and played various characters. And he was disappointed she refused to be his girlfriend. And he said, well, what if we were the last 2 people on Earth? Then would you have sex with me? And she said no. And she said, like, and he's like, why not? He's like, well, Chris, what if you and Barb were the last 2 people on Earth? It doesn't mean you have to do it. Like, would you have sex with Barb if you 2 were the last people on Earth? And apparently, like, he paused for a good period and thought about it and then finally said no. So, yeah, how long this has been going on, who knows? And if Chris wanted to do this for a long time, who knows? But this was the actual end of the love quest, not just the cartoon characters thing, but this was the end. So anyway, Chris was removed from 14 Branchland Court by emergency protective order, and Barb was sent to the hospital for a senior care inspection. So whether or not these acts should be considered rape are like debated among historians, because there's a big theory that Barb has dementia, which would mean she can't consent. So a lot of people debate whether or not this was rape, which I think at this point, I mean, whether you think it or not, a lot of people say he raped his mother. It's like a joke, but whether or not he did, it's important to just note Chris was never charged with or even tried for rape. So again, all we know is he committed incest with his mother. Whether or not he raped her is up for debate. But anyway, so on August 1st, 2021, Noel, who was a member of the Guard Dogs and the founder of the Kiwi Farm, so he's a big influential person in Chris's life, discovered Chris had taken $750 from Barb's bank account while out of the house. And he found this out because he had supervision of Chris's bank account since the Idea Guys thing, which Chris consented to. But anyway, Noel confronted Chris about it, and at first he tried to lie about it, but then when he was, painted into a corner, he had confessed that he did it. So Noel at this point just fed up with Chris's lies and never learning from his mistakes or anything like that, which again, he never does. He reported Chris to the police. And so anyway, Chris was arrested outside the Richmond Regency Inn. And so yeah, after years of trouble with the law, this time Chris messed up so bad, not even pulling the autism card could save him like it worked before. So anyway, Chris spent nearly 2 years from 2021 to 2023 in Central Virginia Regional Jail, besides a brief stint in Western State Hospital, which was a mental hospital. So as you can expect, contact with Chris was limited at this time. Chris was still in contact with Prater pretty regularly, and so the Sonichu merch kept going and was officially approved by Chris or whatever. So during this time, Chris also came to the conclusion that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and he straight up said that whose story in history is most similar to mine? It would have to be Jesus or something. And so Chris believes he's the second coming now. And he also has this belief that Noel is the Judas of today for betraying him, as he put it. So anyway, in March 2023, after nearly 2 years in prison, Chris's case was dismissed and he was released. Chris later claimed he was acquitted, which is not true. So from March to October 2023, Chris was spotted sporadically in public with a young blonde woman, along with other various people, which made people believe, and I think this was confirmed, although I don't know for sure, that he was in a group home at the time. But his car was once seen at 14 Branchland Court, which is his old house. So where he was staying at this point is not really clear. But anyway, Chris made
people checking his house.
Yeah,
stalking.
Well, people check his house basically whenever they're there because
it's crazy.
Well, because it's a tourist. If I was in Ruckersville or even Charlottesville, you bet your ass I'd go to that house. That's holy ground for me, man. So anyway, Chris made his semi-return to the internet when he began liking tweets in August 2023, and he had some communication with other online personalities, but nothing major at the moment really happened. So anyway, Chris officially returned to YouTube in October 2023, and he now had a green screen at his disposal, as well as noticeably higher production values, which led people to believe Prater was helping him with the videos now. So in his return to YouTube, Chris claimed he never had sex with Barb, despite audio evidence proving he did. And that the girl he was hanging out with was this girl who was nicknamed Flutter, but people speculated at the time that she was his first actual real life sweetheart, but he claimed that wasn't the case and she was just a friend of his. And then Chris also began sporadically posting on YouTube as well as live streaming, which he'd done before, but never with much more consistency this time. And so I remember getting a YouTube notification the second this posted. I don't think I ever clicked anything in my life faster than this. So I'm just going to play the first minute. It's really, I don't know what he's trying to do with this video. It's really incomprehensible, but this is the first video he posted, announced he came back. It was the day after my birthday, by the way. I remember that.
It's a gift.
Yeah. All right, let's get this started. All right.
This is the boss, and I'm sick of waiting. Get your crap together and stop following those twerps.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on here.
Prepare for stupid. Make it lucid. Prepare for stupid. Make it lucid. Oh, we'll focus on one mouse.
I'm starting to think Chris might be senile and not Barb, but
I'll be the dude.
I'll cause a fuss. I'll be your major.
Okay, that's enough. It's like it's this crap for like 9 minutes. So that was his official Jesus Christ Chan Sonichu Prime resurrected and returned.
He's speaking in tongues.
Yeah, no, I have no idea what he's trying to get at, but whatever. So Chris's life dramatically changed following his return to the internet. As it was discovered, he now lived in a house in Lynchburg, which was owned by the founder of Prater, Caden Peck. And he still often visits 14 Branchland Court, although whether or not he's like violating some sort of protective order is up for debate. But he, I guess, has some relationship with Barb still, even though, he had sex with her.
Did you say Lynchburg?
Yeah.
Lynchburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
Now I know I will never be going there.
Yeah, stay out. That's bad. But anyway, also in April 2024, Chris began regularly visiting Finland with Flutter because it's debated. Some people think she's like a Finnish immigrant, although some people also say they've seen, and there's no video evidence of this, but they've seen her in public and that she speaks with like an American accent. So, but she has like Finnish hair. I don't know, but she's linked to Finland and they visit there a lot. And this is the first time in apparently like 35 years Chris had been on an airplane, and the first time in history he had left the country. So in September 2024, Chris started a new online shopping website with the help of Prater called Quick Light, which features ridiculously marked up Sonichu medallions and comics. And I mentioned a certain radio show at this time covered this in its first episode right after the site got made. So take a guess which one that was, So anyway, in 2024, Chris also continued irregularly streaming and making YouTube videos despite the constant troll interruptions and donations, which you can expect. Also kind of interesting is in August 2024, Chris's YouTube channel received the 100,000 subscriber play button because he just reached 100,000 subscribers. So he received his silver play button, and YouTube will send a silver play button to Chris Chan. So just before you think about how like morally good YouTube is, think about that for a second. So anyway, we're kind of wrapping up now. So as of 2025, Chris still like irregularly streams and makes videos on YouTube, but
he looks old.
Yeah, I think he's like 43 now or something. He looks older than that though. He looks like early 50s, honestly. Yeah, banging your mom will do that to you. But anyway, the sense of community that he kind of seemed to be building by 2021 with like YouTubers like Kopitz like being friends with him and going to conventions and actually like being celebrated there, despite all he did. But I honestly thought was questionable even back then. Like, I mean, Chris, he's a criminal and he's like a piece of crap. Like, we're really gonna be celebrating him. And of course, when he banged his mother, that completely like most people came to that conclusion as well. But anyway, what his relationship with Barb is like, which is, his only living family member who like will even acknowledge him at this point because of how like ashamed they are of him. Because most of them like disown Chris because they know what he's doing. It's unknown what their relationship is like. So whether or not he'll continue online is like a joke and a warning sign among other people of what not to do, or if he's going to break the law again. And because, I mean, he thinks he was acquitted. He legit thinks he was acquitted of the banging his mom. So he thinks he suffered no recourse of that. So whether or not he's going to go on the slammer again is basically anyone's guess. So we're going to wrap up now because we're done with the timeline. But Chris Chan, I mean, this is just, I feel like what I took from this. So Chris Chan is basically a lesson of what overprotective and coddling parenting, autism, and probably other undiagnosed mental illnesses, a refusal to grow up, and most importantly, as I kept emphasizing, never learning from your mistakes can do to a person. I mean, Chris had many opportunities to leave the internet behind and like start life anew, but he, much like an addict, he could never do that and was always just drawn back to be trolled once again. Despite he often claimed he hated the internet and wished like they never made it, but frankly, it seemed to be like the only thing that ever gave his life purpose. So how much he thinks that is up for debate. So anyway, there have been many lolcows since Chris, but there'll never be one who had such an impact on internet and popular culture as Chris. So, and again, just to put things in perspective, there's more information online about Chris than probably like any other person in human history. So this is the guy that got all that attention. So anyway, Chris once said that his least favorite word, in fact, he maintains that his least favorite word is naive because he claims it, quote, questions one's intelligence. And he thinks it's basically the same word as like stupid when asked. But ironically enough, while that's the incorrect definition, naive is probably like the best possible word in the English language to describe Chris because of how often he just fell for things, took things at face value, and never learned from anything he did in the past. So despite that, though, it's important not to glorify the trolls. We kind of talked about this earlier, but they took it, at the end of the day, the trolls took advantage of an extremely stupid person multiple times and often committed illegal actions against them. And the only reason they probably didn't get sued is because they couldn't find them. So you can laugh at the trolls, but let's be real. With a few exceptions with like Liquid Chris or like Alec Benson Leary, who were just kind of like poking fun at him. Like the trolls are like, if they're probably on the same level as Chris, the vast majority of them.
Yeah, I agree.
So in short, Chris Chan's story is one in which all the players are the losers and the only winners are the spectators.
Yeah.
So anyway, the appeal of Chris, I want to talk a little bit about what I think maybe the appeal of Chris Chan is. And I think it's for different reasons. So Chris Chan to some people is captivating because he just represents this time on the internet where there are basically no rules and no restrictions, and you could, torture an autistic man for fun with basically no recourse. And by no recourse, I don't even mean illegal. I mean like not getting canceled for it. Like you would the trolls all would get like canceled for what they did today, but back then it was like all funny and like no matter if you were like liberal or conservative, like that was funny, and anyone who disagreed was like an idiot. So for some, and like just being honest here, a lot of the people who follow Chris Chan are frankly also unemployed virgins who do not have social lives, and they just kind of enjoy Chris because he represents probably the first time in their lives they found someone who's more pathetic than them. But I would say for me, if I had to describe me personally why I like Chris, I mean there's a little bit of the first thing. Well, I feel like frankly the second thing applies to everyone to a certain degree as well. I mean I'm not an unemployed virgin who lives with my parents, and I mean none of you guys are, but I'm just saying there's still always an aspect of us where like we are ashamed of ourselves for a certain thing, and we look to Chris, and you can laugh a little bit that this guy's more pathetic than us. So anyway, though, for me personally, the main reason I'd say Chris's life is so captivating, and Gino Samuels once asked this, who's the guy who makes like the Chris Chan documentary series, and he gave like the same answer. Chris, in his own mind, is this great hero who battles against the forces of evil because the trolls made him believe that. Like in his mind, he's like a hero who's fighting against, again, like Spectre from James Bond, like this evil New World Order organization that's trying to prevent him from ever getting laid, and his mission in life is to make sure they lose. And despite the fact that, again, he hated the internet and claimed he wishes he never got famous on the internet, and he wishes the internet never existed. The internet is really the only thing. The internet changed from being just, before the internet, he was just some goofy man-child who probably would have just died forgotten, to a man who fought against great villains of history and sometimes sometimes lost and sometimes almost didn't lose. So that's, at least for me, what the appeal of Chris is. A wise man once said, we all have our doghouse to bear, and there's a lot of truth to that. So the last thing I wanted to do here before we end the slideshow is I put some quotes about Chris Chan from some people I've mentioned before that are pretty funny. So Matthew Devoria, who if you remember was Casey's father in The Father Call, which is like the most famous Chris Chan video of all time, he once said to Chris, nobody can get you to do anything. Play your Pokemans, watch TV, sleep, eat McDonald's. That's your life, and that's basically true. So Jackie, when she broke up with Chris, or when she like chastised Chris for breaking up with her and still asking to have sex with her, he said, if you want to go your whole life without having to face the truth about yourself, that's fine. Just accept that you won't be respected as an adult and that you won't be getting a girlfriend or sex ever. And that was one of her most famous quotes. Rob Bell, your boy, in his court appearance with Chris, referred to Chris as saying, quote, he's essentially an adult autistic child, which is Chris visibly apparently in court like looked pissed at that, but he was smart enough to know not to like get up and do anything, but that's how Rob Bell referred to him. So anyway, Noel, when talking about Chris, when like explaining why he turned against Chris, I guess he wants to say that, said, on top of learning that he can't learn, I have to realize that he's malicious. He knows that doing these things are wrong, and he doesn't care, because if he gets away with it, that's all that matters, which is pretty true, I feel like. Clyde Cash once said, and it was in the call where Julie, Blue Spike revealed that he was a 13-year-old boy and that Julie was never real and that he made him shove the Sancho medallion up his ass for no reason. Clyde joined the call and said it to Chris, and I think it's probably the best possible quote. He said, you say you learn from your mistakes, but you never seem to, ever, which is, basically true. Another quote is this one. Actually, this was like when he was a lot more niche on the internet, like 2005, so before he got super famous. Oh, we're just past 20 years of this quote, actually. I didn't notice this. Yeah, just a few days past 20 years now. But a user once on a forum about to go back a bit, Chris used to draw the Sonichu comics at the University of Virginia campus. And this one like girl who was like a school reporter or something noticed him there a lot. And so she wrote like a column on a forum about like just her thoughts on him. And she said about him once, he seems intelligent enough to understand that he does not understand. And that is the hardest part of all, which is probably the most profound quote I think that was ever said about Chris. And then Chris himself said, which is pretty funny, he said, I'm possibly R-worded, okay? My mind doesn't think so swift, which is pretty much true. All right, well, that is the end of the 136 slide Chris Chan presentation. Thank you. I appreciate it. Any final thoughts before we...
I got a question for you.
Yeah?
Just considering where Chris is now, and whatever that company is that's keeping him like going.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think that's gonna end, and where do you think Chris is gonna go? You think he's gonna be homeless?
I don't see any reason it would end because they know
Forever.
I mean, the only reason it would end is like Caden Peck or whatever dies, or when Chris dies. So that I could at least predict, because if they're gonna stick with him through this, I feel like they're gonna stick through him for like anything he does.
Huh.
So I feel like it's just gonna keep going. I feel like the only way if it ended, what would happen is I feel like the house is in the name of Prater, and even though they own it, they have him pay rent to them. So probably would kick Chris out. He'd be homeless, I guess, and we would either hear from him again when he's in like a group home, or again, people are kind of split on what the legal thing is with him going to 14 Branchland Court. So we don't really know if he legally could just go back there, but he either go there, be homeless, or like I don't know what he'd do. So
hopefully he's saving money up from his YouTube.
Yeah, no, that's a good. He does make a good amount from the YouTube videos, apparently, like a lot. So I hope he's saving that.
Well, he is an internet celebrity.
Yeah, he is. So I don't think he makes enough money from his YouTube videos alone to like live off it, because he only has like 100,000 subscribers.
What's his channel called?
It's Quickville Guardian. He's had a lot of channels, but like IBA Chandler was one of them before, which is the Ian Brandon Anderson channel. But yeah, before we move on, Mike, is there anything you want to say to close in?
So that's 136 slides.
Yeah.
That is I really appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
Life's work.
I'm sorry I missed part 1.
That's okay. Yeah, part 1 was funnier, but that's okay. You know, you got a lot of the good stuff in part 2. So.
But yeah, dude.
Yeah.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, I will suggest if anyone listening, or if you guys want to learn more about Chris Chan, if you'd like to learn more about Chris Chan, visit your local library. Actually, I would say is there's a good documentary about this guy Satchumo, I think his name. He's not like a regular YouTuber. He just made this one video, and then he like kind of left. But he made like a Chris Chan documentary that was like an hour long. That came out about 10 years ago. And it was actually really hyped up at the time because it was like the first documentary project on Chris Chan. That's like a good thing for like people. Okay, at this point, I feel like that there's no point to learn more about him from that, because this has been more in depth than that was. Yeah. And also, I feel like it was a decent documentary, but I feel like I mean, if I was watching it, I could point out, but he kind of got a lot of stuff wrong watching it that I noticed. But it was like a decent. It's like that's how if you didn't see the slideshow, people just want to learn about Chris Chan. That's a good place to start. If you want to learn more about Chris Chan, I'd recommend either again going to the Quickie, which is like the Chris Chan Wiki, or the Geno Samuel Chris Chan Comprehensive History series, which is probably like the biggest inspiration for the slideshow. And that is like way more in depth than this. And it's about 86 parts long, and it's like each part's like 40 minutes long, and they're up to the arrest now, I think. So yeah, so if you want to learn more about Chris Chan, I recommend watching that. It's also a much better produced documentary in my opinion. But yeah, Mikey, what do you want to say?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, for anybody who is wondering how hard Josiah worked, imagine. I know Josiah didn't do this, but imagine retyping something 136 times. I know you didn't do that.
Yeah, no, I see.
Because but like making 136 slides, even if you did copy and paste, that is.
Well, tell them how many hours you put in.
I think it was about like 28 in total. Although
tell somebody that cares about the radio show, okay? KUGR.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Pay attention to that, guys. You know, it's important. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys. I know it's like really boring and it went on for a long time, but I was happy to finally do it. So a round of applause. We'll leave. I mean, we spent 3/4 of the show on this, which is what it honestly went on longer than I thought. So I am sorry about. I thought we were going to be done like a half hour ago.
I want to get your opinion on something. Mm-hmm. What age do you think Chris is going to pass away?
That's a good question, because
he is very. That if it happens,
he is very unhealthy. I mean, clearly just look at him. But the thing is, Bob lived a long time, and he was on the same level as Chris in terms of like health wise. And most people in Bob's family lived a long time, so I'm gonna assume and Barb's still alive too. And I think she's outlived how old Bob lived to be. So I would honestly say Chris will pass away if I had to guess it. I think he's gonna outlive the like average life expectancy, but I don't think he's gonna get much farther. I'm gonna at the oldest, I'd say maybe he'll live to be like 80, maybe.
Wow.
Are you gonna be sad?
Yeah, I'll be sad. Well,
I'm gonna go.
Sad isn't the right word, because Chris is like a piece of crap. I was trying to be objective, but there are just so many times where it's just so hard. Chris is a bad person, but it'll be okay. I'll be 60 when Chris is 80. So
wow.
First of all, I'm gonna say definitively right now, I know for a fact I will still care about this stuff when I'm 60. So
yeah.
And if that's when he dies, then
Tell your kid about it.
well, I'll be sad in terms of it's like a huge portion of my life just ended. I mean, not just end. I don't mean like that means like my life is. I mean like, it's like when like you figure out like freaking people who watch Mr. Rogers and they figure out Mr. Rogers died. You know,
Yeah.
I mean it's not the same thing as Mr. Rogers was a good person, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's like that where it's like, oh, something I grew up with. I mean, even though I was like in high school when I figured out about Christianity, someone I grew up with is gone. You know, and it's one of those things where I'm not sad for Christian. I'm just sad for like what I'm losing in a way. You know.
Yeah.
And also my favorite headcanon about the whole Christian sort of story is that he is the greatest troll in history, actually. In all of this, he actually is aware of all this stuff. He let people troll him. He's just having fun.
Well, there was a really minor saga. I didn't mention it because it was really minor. Right before the liquid thing where he tried to people thought that was true because he made this video. Yeah, right before the liquid thing where it was called Rollin' and Trollin', where it was him. It was like a pre-edited video made by one of his like few friends in real. Well, they were a troll too, like one of the trolls who hung out with him in real life. That was him announcing, like, this whole time I was a troll myself, and I actually have a real job. And he was wearing like tattoo sleeves, and he was like had his goatee for the first time, and people legit believed. I mean, I think it was like 50-50, or no, it was more than that. I think it was like the majority believed that was real, but there was still a large section who didn't. But
yeah, I like to think that's real.
Yeah, so and that would be really funny. I mean, if that was
on
true.
You.
Yeah, but so he tried to pull that off, and originally he did plan to just straight up like he was going to leave the internet and try to and make people believe that was true, which would have been like the greatest play in history. But he literally like by the same old trick, some troll hacked his PSN and said he has to admit he's gay or else they're going to sell it or whatever. And so he was brought, or this time it was admit that was fake and you are actually like a loser. And of course he did that like everyone is suspecting. The cycle just continued. Although that was the video. Although if we're gonna go like butterfly effect, that was the video I think that inspired Liquid Chris to become a thing because that was what inspired him to be like, well, I'm the real Chris Chan, and I am still autistic.
Yeah.
So, that's you gotta take the bitter with the sweet.
I'm gonna go really quick. I'm gonna go 2038 is when he passes away.
Whoa, that's soon.
Okay. Yeah, he'll
23.
be.
Well, that's when he thinks. That's when he thinks.
That's not a bad guess. I mean, I think he's gonna live longer than that, but that's not factoring in like. Chris is like crazy enough that I feel like he could get into an incident where like he tries to like steal a cop's gun and he gets shot. Like Chris is that crazy. So that I think I'm saying if he was to die of like natural cause, I think he's gonna die. I could easily see him dying before that. So
I think you'll go with the dimensional merge.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, moving on. Thanks guys for listening again because I know it went on for a really long time.